5-day online FTP. Welcome back all to the 5-day online FTP on innovation acquisition of IPR, jointly organized by Airtel Academy and IUC IPRS. We have reached the second session of the day, and the session will be taken by Dr. IG Ratish as Sita Lakshmi of second semester of LLM IPR PhD to introduce the resource person.
Thank you so much, Smriti. Am I audible?
Yes, Sita.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So now I am so happy and I'm so overjoyed, in fact, to invite Dr. IG Ratish, who is also my professor, my lecturer at the IOC APRS Center. And I warmly welcome Dr. IG Ratish sir to the second session of this program. Dr. IG Ratish is working as assistant professor at the Inter-University Center for IPR Studies, CUSAT, since August 2015, and is also a registered Indian patent agent. Dr. IG Ratish is entrusted with the task of facilitating filing of patents among teaching and research fraternity and sensitization of IPRs across various academic forums. He is also the coordinator of the IPR facilitation cell at IUC IPRS. He has facilitated the filing of 25 patent applications filed in the name of various universities in Kerala, including one in the USA, the others being in India. He has also drafted and filed 10 patent applications of individuals, entrepreneurs, or startups in India. He holds a PhD degree in chemistry with 11 research publications in peer-reviewed journals. A compound developed by him reached advanced stages of testing against cancer cell lines at National Cancer Institute, USA. He has 4 research scholars working in the area of IPR under his guidance for a PhD degree. Specialized in the area of patent filing and related matters, he was also instrumental in propelling the invalidation of key patents of rival pharmaceutical companies at various judicial and quasi-judicial forums. Prior to joining CUSAT, he has worked for around 7 years in a couple of reputed MNC pharmaceutical companies in R&D and patents department respectively. I warmly and wholeheartedly welcome Ratish sir for the second session. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Sita. Thanks for the wonderful introduction. Give me a moment to share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Welcome once again, all of you, to this second session. So I'll be discussing about this topic of patent search and its importance. So this is basically broadly the structure of my presentation, what I intend to cover today. So I'll quickly look through the various patent search, what basically it is. So it also includes prior art. So basically patent search, we always relate that to a prior art search. So we'll quickly look at what the prior art is and what its nature is under patent search. And then I move on to the types of prior art searches over here. So basically, I'm looking at various prior art search types or kinds over here. So we have about 5 prior art search types that I'm going to discuss when I discuss a particular slide on this. And then I move on to the patent search tools. So in the under the head patent search tools, I'll be covering the various databases that are normally explored for carrying out search for patent literature, which includes free databases as well as it also includes proprietary databases. And then quickly I move on to the benefits of patent search over the conventional or the traditional science and technology literature search, which we normally carry out on journals or other forums. So what's the benefit? Most of you probably are not aware of the benefits of a patent search. So we'll quickly look into that. Then I move on to the patent search strategies. So broadly, I'm covering 3 search strategies over there. So one is the keyword search strategy. The second one is a classification search strategy, so which is in fact unique to the patent system and which also gives an advantage over the keyword search strategy. So we'll quickly look into that. And the third search strategy that I'm covering over there is basically the chemical structure search. So chemical structure search is unique because it may not be possible to identify the chemical compounds based on the keywords or even based on classification symbols. So there are certain limitations when you are carrying out search pertaining to chemical substances. So we'll look into that as well. So those are the 3 strategies that I'll be covering in the patent search strategies. And then finally, I'll give you a brief overview of a couple of patent documents. One is in the pharmaceutical domain and one is in the mechanical domain. So just to give you the difference, and if you plan to carry out a literature search on patent documents, what part you need to actually focus on and what part you must exclude while quickly browsing through these documents. So one of the inhibitions that I have normally noticed even when I started off the patent search was looking at these documents because these are techno-legal documents. Some of the patent attorneys, you find that they draft it very complicatedly. So it can be discouraging at times. Unlike scientific scientific literatures or journal publications wherein everything is specific and to the point, but in the case of patents, you find that they may be very broad in nature. The claims could be complicated, but then where you should focus when you are trying to look at these documents. So I have taken 2 technology domains over there. One is a pharmaceutical domain and the second one is a mechanical domain. So the subtle differences between the 2 domains when you look at the patent documents. So that is in a nutshell that I'm going to quickly cover over here. Moving on to basically the types of prior art searches. As I discussed, so we have discussed this even in the previous sessions, but then my focus would be to highlight the importance of these searches and what's the objectivity of these searches and how these are actually carried out. So novelty search, as we discussed yesterday, if you intend to file a patent application, you need to carry out a novelty search to ascertain whether your invention is novel in the first place. So that's what novelty search means. And novelty search can refer to finding out documents in the public domain that could be either published scientific literature or it could also be published patent literature. And in fact, oral knowledge also. We'll discuss that. I have a slide on what prior art is and what its nature is. So whether I'll discuss that in detail. Patentability search. Patentability search is a bit different from novelty search because novelty search is one aspect of patentability search. So we discussed yesterday what are the requirements or criteria for patentability. So your invention must be novel, it must have an inventive step, and it must be capable of being made or practiced in an industry. So patentability search looks at the combination of novelty search plus inventive step assessment plus industrial application. So when you combine all these three, that's when you call it as a patentability search. So novelty search, normally what we do is if you want to file a provisional patent applications, you can quickly carry out a novelty search and check if that invention is existing anywhere in the world in an entire document. So I'll try to distinguish between these two searches over there. Now, the third one is the freedom to operate search. So as the name says, particularly if you intend to introduce a product in the market, even though your product may have intellectual property protection, we always, as most of these companies which carry out the IP due diligence, that means they check whether my product, if I introduce it in the market, is it going to infringe any third party's intellectual property right or my competitors' property right? So they may be looking at patents, they may be looking at designs, they may be also looking at copyright and trademark over there for one particular product. So when I discuss in detail about freedom to operate, I have an example that I have illustrated. So we'll understand that particular concept when we move to that dedicated slide on freedom to operate search. Moving on to the fourth aspect, it's the invalidity search. So once you carry out an freedom to operate search, there may be a likelihood that you may be infringing some of the intellectual property. So let's assume you are infringing a patent of your competitor. So in such cases, if you want to launch a product, then you have to take the defense that that the patent is invalid, so which in fact is blocking the launch of your particular product in the market. So that's where you carry out an invalidity search. So you look for grounds to prove that the invention or the patented invention is not novel, it lacks inventive step, it cannot be made or used in an industry. And likewise, it is a non-patentable subject matter. So we discussed about non-patentable subject matter yesterday. So discoveries are not patentable in India. So likewise, you look at all those grounds, and then based on those grounds, you can file a revocation petition to revoke the patent if it has been granted, or you can file an opposition representation before the patent office if the patent is not granted. That's a pre-grant opposition, or even the post-grant opposition if it has been less than a year since the patent has been granted in India. So my focus would be on India. So please assume that whatever I'm talking is in the context of India. All the novelty search and patentability search are normally carried out globally, but freedom to operate searches are normally restricted locally or to geographies where you intend to actually launch your product over there. So we'll look at when we discuss the slides over there. And finally, looking at the state of the art search. So when we talk about the state of the art search, what we are trying to do is we are trying to look at a technology landscape. So if as a company you want to venture into a new technology area, so you might want to look what the IP landscape of that particular area or a sub area of that technology is. So that's what basically the objective of looking at is. So it's just a screening that you're carrying out to quickly look whether such areas or to identify something we call as white space, to identify areas where there are no intellectual property rights, technology areas, so that you can actually venture into that. So there are certain objectives of state of the art search. We'll look into those objectives, particularly when we are discussing about these aspects in detail. So this is just an overview of what I'm going to discuss today. Now moving on to prior art. So basically, I told you that we focus on prior art search. So what basically is a prior art? So prior art is any pre-existing knowledge. So in the domain or which is available to the public. So for instance, if I intend to file a patent application today, anything and everything that is there in the public domain or available to the public until yesterday would constitute a prior art. Now let's quickly look at the nature of prior art. So what can a prior art be? It could be a published literature. So published literature could either be a patent literature or it could be a non-patent literature. Now, non-patent literature could be scientific or technical publications that most of these academics or the industry people publish. It can also be proceedings in a conference or presentations in conferences. So that also would constitute as a prior art. So you can notice that I have given a different font color for these because under the Indian Act, if you disclose your invention in a conference, and if you file your patent application within 12 months of such disclosure, it may not constitute as a prior art. But then if you file your patent application beyond 12 months, that means maybe 2 years or 3 years after you have disclosed your work in a particular conference, it could be an oral presentation, or it could also be a something that has come as part of the proceedings of the conference. So in such situations, it may or may not act as a prior art depending on the situation. So if you have filed the patent application in India within 12 months of such disclosure, it may not constitute a prior art. But then if you have filed a patent application beyond the 12-month period, then it may still constitute as a prior art. So as Srinivasan sir was talking about in the previous session, that even if you are the inventor, if you disclose it, there is a likelihood that it can actually destroy the novelty of your invention. So those things will always matter. In fact, drawings or designs also can constitute as a prior art. So there is this case in the US when one of these patents was revoked, primarily because there was a design registration granted in the Germany. So design registration, normally you find that a copyright is given. So you only have this drawing that is available. So there is no description. Even a drawing or an intellectual, even a disclosure in a different form of IP can actually constitute as a prior art over there. So drawings, particularly in the mechanical domain, can be self-explanatory. So that means just by looking at the drawing, you can understand what that invention is or how it works. So in such situations, that also can be considered as a prior art over there. So it's not necessary that it always has to be copyrighted literature or patent literature, but it can also be other forms of literature that can constitute. So that brings to me the YouTube videos. So well, YouTube videos, can it actually constitute as a prior art is a question that you need to look at. So that also, as you can see, I've used a different font color. So depends. That means if the YouTube is publicly available, now these days you find that you find a lot of videos on do it yourself, which is abbreviated as DIY. So if you are an entrepreneur and you have posted your video on the YouTube and it becomes viral, and then you decide to file a patent application, well, that can in fact be fatal to the novelty of your invention. So there is a likelihood that the patent will not be granted, most likely, unless you make some changes to what you have disclosed in your YouTube. And the changes must not be just cosmetic in nature, but there must be some functional element to that particular modification that you may have made post the disclosure in a YouTube video. But if the YouTube video is private, then you, as you are aware, you cannot locate private YouTube videos on YouTube, even if you search by name. So those are not indexed. So such situations, there is a likelihood that it may still not be constituted as a prior art. So as it was saying, whether it is there in the public domain, whether it is accessible and available is also something that we normally look at. Now moving on to prior use. Prior use also is depends. For instance, in the Indian context, if your prior use is commercial in nature, then it will destroy the novelty of your use, the novelty of your invention. That means before filing a patent applications, you start selling that product in the market, or you launch the product in the market, and then subsequent to the launch, you you decide to file a patent application. So in such situations, the invention may constitute as a prior use. But let's assume you are using this invention for certain purposes. That means for reasonable trial, if you're using that invention in the public domain. So it is necessary that you have to check the efficiency of that invention in the public. So could be a tube light that you may have invented or an LED light. So that needs to be checked in the public domain. But then the use has to be purely as you said, for reasonable trial. And the second condition is that within 1 year of such use, you have to actually file a patent application in India. So I reiterate, I'm talking in the context of India. So these things may vary from one country to another country. But if the prior use is commercial in nature, then it will be considered as a prior art over there. And moving on to the final category, that is oral knowledge. So this is unique to India primarily because there may be knowledge that is existing in or which is called as traditional knowledge, which is transmitted from one generation to another orally. So there may not be any documentation, there may not be any literature available, or there may not be any prior use available. So even such knowledge also can actually constitute as a prior art in the Indian context. I hope I am audible to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So quickly, I have divided this prior art into two aspects depending on what you intend to carry out. One is a literature survey. So that means you are checking for literature on the web, you are looking at patent literature, or you are looking at non-patent literature. Now, the second aspect is market survey. So if you recall, there can be products which may not have any sort of intellectual property protection, but they may be available in the market. So while the patent office may not actually evaluate the products which are available in the market, it can be the responsibility, particularly when your competitor has filed a patent application and you want to get that patent revoked, but you don't find any sufficient literature which can be promising to get that patent revoked or opposed. You can rely on market survey. So if the competitor or the patent applicant has introduced a product in the market prior to filing a patent application, so you locate the product, you locate the invoices, you locate the product description. So that is something we call as market survey. So that if the literature survey is not sufficient, then you can also look at market survey. But market survey is not traditionally done even by the patent offices or even by the applicants themselves. But then it can be relied by third parties when they want to get the patents revoked or want to oppose these patent applications that have been filed with the Indian Patent Office. So let me discuss the first aspect of the different kinds of patent search. The first one is the novelty search. So novelty search, please understand, it's not just restricted to patent search, but my session is going to focus exclusively on the patent documents and the patent databases. So I'm restricting it to patent. But ideally, if you see, novelty search is carried out in most of these academic and research institutes. If you look, if you have a PhD student intending to work under you, so you may be carrying out a literature survey over there to identify whether that idea or the research topic that you intend to carry out is actually original in nature or not. So those things are always carried out. But then what people are not aware of doing these searches on the patent literature basis, patent literature databases. So here the objective is to evaluate if an invention is novel. So we discussed that what novelty is. So if your invention has not been disclosed anywhere in the world before the filing of a patent application, it is deemed to be novel. But then how is it actually evaluated by the patent office or even by these law firms while they evaluate the novelty of your invention? So what they do is they identify or they search for a single document which is disclosing your entire invention in a single prior publication. So what it means is I have to identify a document. So it could be my own disclosure. I may have disclosed it in a journal or maybe in a conference, or it could be a third party. And the disclosure could be anywhere in the world. So when you carry out novelty search or patentability search, you are looking at literature available globally. So it's not just restricted to India. But when patent rights are granted, those are territorial in nature. That means patent rights are given. If a patent in India is granted, you can enforce your rights only in India. So you are identifying any particular literature, a single literature which is covering your invention entirely. Now this could be scientific or technical publication. So for instance, if my invention is a wireless mouse, now let's assume that prior to filing my patent application in India, in China, there was already a disclosure of this wireless mouse. So if I carry out a search and I identify that this wireless mouse was either available in the Chinese market, one, you're importing it into India, or it has been disclosed in a Chinese patent document over there. So in such situations, what happens is, and it's there in one single document disclosing this wireless mouse, then in such situations, your invention will not be novel. So you'll have to, one, either abandon your idea, or you will have to actually improve upon your invention, existing invention. So maybe you can use a different wireless technology than what the Chinese invention is using, and prove that it is better, or it has got some sort of a technical advancement over that existing wireless technology in the case of mouse. Now, not just looking at scientific and technical publication, but we also look at patent literature. So I have a slide wherein I specifically discuss what is the benefit of looking at patent literature when compared to non-patent literature over there. Now, moving on to the next aspect is there can be possibilities wherein there may not be any disclosure in a publication. But as I said, either you or someone else may have actually introduced that product in the market as such, so without any modification. And whatever is there in the market, you are trying to protect that that particular product by filing a patent application. But then that is done after such commercial use, right? So then in such situations, your invention will not be novel. So if I start selling my mouse, the wireless mouse in India, and after selling it in the market, I decide to file a patent application. So in such situations, what happens is the patent will not be granted by the patent office, primarily because your invention would lack novelty over there, right? So your own disclosure is already there in the public domain. Now, moving on to the patentability search, just a moment. Yeah, I was just checking at the time. Moving on to patentability search. So patentability search normally includes searching for prior arts. So as I mentioned, I discussed what a prior art is. So in fact, when I was discussing about YouTube videos, even I refer to YouTube videos when I need to understand an invention, either for carrying out a novelty search or even for drafting. So it is very, very important that as an inventor or as a patent agent, you understand the invention for either for drafting an application or filing, or it can also be for carrying out a novelty or a patentability search. So the first step that you carry out over there is carry out a search. So you may identify certain keywords, or you may identify the classification of that particular invention in the patent classification system, or you could also use a combination of both, and then you identify the relevant documents over there. Now, once you have identified the documents, initially you will carry out a novelty assessment. So this I have already discussed in my previous slide. So if your invention is novel, then you move into inventive step assessment. For instance, I gave this example of a wireless mouse. So if the wireless mouse were not disclosed anywhere in the world prior to my filing application, but prior to my filing the patent application, or the product was not available in the market. So in such situations, my invention would be novel. Then I'll move into the inventive step assessment. So when I carry out the inventive step assessment, it is always with regards to combination of the features of the invention in two or more documents, right? So novelty assessment is always with regards to the invention being present entirely in a single document. When we are talking about inventive step assessment, we look at the combination of these features in two or more documents. So as you saw, the example that was cited in the previous session by Srinivasan sir of this particular chair or stool. So he was comparing that stool with the patent claim over there of that of a chair. So if all that three features that were disclosed over there, if that are present in a single document, then your invention is not novel. But then one of the elements was present in this particular stool, the remaining two elements were absent. But if the remaining two elements are there in some other document covering this aspect of chair, and then you are combining both those documents and you're arriving at your invention, then in such situations, it can be obvious to a person skilled in the art. So PISITA is basically an acronym for a person skilled in the art that we use in the Indian context. So if I'm talking about a wireless mouse, the person skilled in the art would be a software engineer or a hardware engineer who understands the technology or who is well versed with the particular technology over there. So if my invention is novel, let's assume, as I said, the case of a wireless mouse. Now what I would do is I'll move on to the inventive step assessment. I'll try to identify what is the most relevant prior art document with regards to my invention, that is this wireless mouse. So in the context of a wireless mouse, the most relevant prior art document would be a wired mouse, right? So because that's what would be the most relevant. So the first step, we also we normally call it as the closest prior art over there. So you identify what is the closest prior art over there. So you have carried out a search, you have got so many documents, and then you look for the documents depending on whether you're doing a novelty assessment or an inventive step assessment over there. So if one of the literature is talking about the wired mouse, now that is a foundation. So that means you already have a wired mouse in the public domain. There is literature or the product available. Now the modification that you have made or the improvement that you have made to the wireless mouse, to the wired mouse, is that you have introduced this technology, the wireless technology, into the wired mouse. Now there is a second document which in fact discloses that that there is this wireless Bluetooth keyboard that is available, or the product is available in the market. So what you have done is you have looked at these two documents. One, you have looked at your wireless mouse. Sorry, you have looked at your wired mouse. Second, you have also looked at this particular document which discloses this wireless Bluetooth keyboard over there, or a wireless technology, a keyboard based on a wireless technology. So when you are looking at these two documents, you get an idea that I should probably combine them and then see if that invention is possible. So when you're combining them, and if the result or the outcome is considered to be a mere workshop improvement, then it will be considered obvious to a person skilled in that. That means it would be obvious to a software engineer or a hardware engineer. So it was you're just adopting that technology, wireless keyboard technology, into mouse, and you probably did not. It was just a mere workshop improvement. But there is another possibility that while you're trying to adopt this technology or incorporate this technology into the keyboard, into the mouse, you faced hardships over there. So you had to make changes, structural changes to the mouse. So in such situations, it may not be obvious to a person skilled in the art. So you are carrying out an assessment by looking at two, or it could also be more documents. So that's minimum. At least you need to have two documents, wherein your concept or your invention may be spread across these documents. So some features may be there in one, and the other features may be there in another document, which is relevant. So wireless technology, the relevant example I gave is that of a Bluetooth keyboard, right? Now you also look at industrial applicability. So basically, this is what even the patent office does. So yesterday, if you recall, ma'am had shown a first examination report. So you could see that you had all these grounds elaborate over there. So patent office checks for novelty, checks for inventive step, checks whether your invention can be applied to an industry or not. Likewise, it also looks whether it is a non-patentable subject matter or not, and also the disclosure, whether whatever disclosure you have provided, is it sufficient, is it fully and particularly enabled? Because we saw that patent is basically a reward given to an inventor for disclosing his invention for a certain period of time. After that period expires, the invention falls in the public domain, and the public must reap the benefits of that. So you must clearly describe what that invention is. If it's a product, you must say that that whatever the product is, what is its components, and how that particular product is made. So you cannot just claim a product and not disclose the process of making that product. So that's where you talk about sufficiency of disclosure. Moving on to industrial applicability, industrial applicability is viewed upon as whether the invention that you have made, can it be actually practiced in an industry? Is it abstract? For example, if it's a method of playing a game, that even if the invention may be novel or inventive step, but it is not considered to have this utility. So you cannot actually practice a method of playing a game in a particular industry. So those things will also be assessed by the patent office. And we also looked one of the most important steps that the patent office looks at is the inventive step requirement. This is basically, we could call it as a gatekeeper. So most of the patents are rejected for lacking inventive step over there. So patentability search, when compared to novelty searches, it is novelty search plus inventive step assessment plus industrial applicability. And then non-patentable subject matter I've not included over here, but then that is also evaluated by the patent office. So if it's a discovery, you have discovered a plant species or you have discovered a microorganism, it may not be a patentable subject matter in the Indian context, even though a microorganism that you may have invented in the lab may still be patentable, but something that's already existing in the nature may not be patentable. Right. So when you're evaluating industrial applicability, you're seeing whether that invention can be made or used in an industry. So whether it has a utility. So for example, it can also be, as I said, you have come up with an invention which you claim to be a machine which is perpetual in nature, which works 24/7. So that may not actually be possible. So in such situations, we could say that there is lack of utility, or you may have actually developed a chemical molecule. You don't know what the utility of it is. So in fact, there is one of these patents which was refused in the US because there was a process of making particular steroids, but then they did not disclose the application of that particular steroid. So it may have been used as a drug, but there was no disclosure, and it was in fact held not to. It failed the utility requirement in the US. Now, moving on to the freedom to operate. So now we are changing gears. If you look at the previous two types of search, we were there as an inventor. So we were probably trying to generate intellectual property over here. In freedom to operate, our role could be dual. So in the sense that we may have already generated intellectual property for a particular product, but then we are intending to launch that product in the market. So while you are intending to launch that product in the market, so this is normally carried out before introducing a market, or even when, if you look particularly in the pharmaceutical industry, you look when you are even initially trying to do research. So if it's a generic drug, if you're intending to carry out the research, you will always look at whether the process that the generic company is trying to develop, is it infringing on any existing patents over there, or whether there is already a product patent for the pharmaceutical. So all those factors are normally evaluated under freedom to operate. But freedom to operate evaluates the potential or actual IP roadblocks. So by potential IP roadblocks, I mean is there could be a patent application which is pending. So if it is granted, it can become a roadblock over there. An actual IP roadblocks could be granted patents that are already existing over there. And it can also be other forms of IP. So in my subsequent slide, I also show an example of this particular unit of a pressure cooker. There I'll try to differentiate between these two aspects over there. And your intention over here is to commercialize your product. So you're ready to launch it, or you are carrying out research and development, or prior to carrying out R&D of your product, you may be carrying out a freedom to operate search over there. It's also called as infringement search. Freedom to operate is more broad in sense because you are actually trying to look whether if my product is introduced in a particular geography, is it going to violate someone's intellectual property in that particular geography? So evaluation is territorial in nature. So whenever we evaluate freedom to operate, so it is normally for a specific country or a group of countries. So if I want to introduce my product in India, then I look at the patent landscape only for the Indian context. So I'm not going to look at any other literature. Even as I said, we are also not going to rely on the non-patent literature, because non-patent literature will not actually block your products in introducing your products over there. So they are not blocking, but patents can definitely be blocking over there. Now, FTO may change with time as it depends on the patent status and publication status. So it comes with a date and timestamp. So if I have carried out an FTO, that's a freedom to operate for a particular, for introducing a particular product in the Indian market, then it may be valid only until today. So tomorrow, if a patent application gets published or if a patent gets granted, which was pending, so then it can actually change the outcome of my outcome of the launch of my product. So if it is a blocking patent, then I may have to wait for the expiry of the patent, or I may have to invalidate that patent, or I may have to come up with a non-infringing strategy. So non-infringing strategy is to come up with a workaround strategy or a circumvention strategy. So it is an alternative that you are trying to look at so that you don't infringe someone's intellectual property. So as I said, the focus of this study would normally be to look at valid patents and pending patent documents. So these are searched for a particular country. So if I want to introduce my product in India, I look at the various patent documents for that particular product in India and classify them as blocking patents and non-blocking patents. And then if there are blocking patents, I may have to, get that patent revoked if I have to introduce my product in the patent. Because if I don't do that, once I introduce my product at risk, there is a likelihood that the company or the patentee can sue me and get an injunction, whether a preliminary or a permanent injunction with regards to my patent over there, with regards to my product over there. Now, if there is a negative FTO that prevents the launch of the particular product that I'm talking about over there, so that means if there is already a patent, I may have located a patent over there, which may prevent, or if I introduce my product in the market, it can infringe upon that particular patent. So in such situations, there is a likelihood that I may have to have alternatives in mind or various strategies. So this is an example that I just wanted to show to you. So on the right hand side or the right column, you see that this is a product that is intended to be launched. So it's not yet been introduced in the market. So I have got a trademark for this product. So I've got BP as a trademark. I've also got an industrial design, copyright in the design for this particular design of the pressure cooker. So as you can see, my trademark is BP, and the trademark of this existing product, which is already there in the market, is SL. So it is not going to create any confusion in the mind of consumers when they are trying to buy these two different pressure cookers. So I may not be infringing, I will not be infringing upon the trademark over there. But what about the industrial design? So if you look the industrial design, so the design of the particular my product is more like in the form of a pot shape, whereas the one of the competitor is in fact cylindrical in nature, or it appears cylindrical over there. So in such a situation, prima facie, I may not also be infringing upon the industrial design over there, even though I am owning these trademarks and industrial designs. Now, third, I don't own a patent for this product, but then SL actually owns a patent for the product. Now, the patent could be, let's assume, for the lid that is being used to close the pressure cooker, or it could also be for the pressure valve over there. So it could be for both. Now, what I have done is I have used the lid and maybe the what do you call the pressure valve. So what I've done is I have made some cosmetic changes to the pressure valve. So there is a likelihood that I may infringe the patent of this product SL if I introduce it into the market. So that's how you are looking. I'm looking at the launch in India. So India, there is a patent, this particular patent, the utility patent. So if there is a likelihood that I may infringe the patent, then I will have to have a certain strategy. So I have a 5-prong approach for that in my subsequent slide. So when I say that there is a likelihood that I may infringe upon any existing patent in India, if you're talking in the context of India, then approach one could be that I file a patent revocation petition, and then I get this particular patent revoked. And if it is a pending patent, then I file a pre-grant opposition at the Indian Patent Office. Approach two is I plead that I'm not infringing your patent. My product is actually different from what is claimed in your patent. So in such situations, I may still be in a position to introduce my product in the market. Now, approach three is you wait for the expiry of the patent. So if the patent is strong, that means you cannot get it revoked, and in fact, you are infringing that patent. So in such situations, even if you file a revocation or maybe a pre-grant opposition, if it is not successful and the patent is granted, then you will have to wait till the expiry of the patent, or you can approach these patentee for granting license to use their particular invention, and then you pay them a royalty or an upfront for based on the sales, right? So that's one way. So if the duration of the protection is longer, then you can always look at licensing. But then if the expiry period is maybe less than 2 years or less than 1 year, then maybe you can wait for the expiry and then introduce your product in the market. And finally, so this is if nothing actually fructifies, maybe you can acquire the company. So that's one. You normally find that big pharma companies also do that. They acquire these small pharma companies which are into developing these new molecules. So that's one way of actually addressing this problem. So you acquire that company. Once you acquire the company, all their intellectual property also would be assigned to you. So then you own that patent, and then you are free to actually introduce your product or even the same product in the market, right? Now moving on to invalidity search. So as I said as one of the options, option one that I discussed, or approach one I discussed in the previous slide, was to invalidate a patent over there. So if a patent has been granted, you say, the patent is invalid for so and so reasons. So we'll discuss that and kindly revoke the patent. So previously we used to file revocation petitions at the IPAB, but now since IPAB has been dissolved, and then there is this new, what you would say, a new system coming in place. So then we'll have to file revocation petitions over there. So the first step of carrying out a invalidity search is you check for prior arts over there so that you can invalidate these granted patents or oppose pending patents. So you'll be trying to evaluate whether that patent is novel or not, or whether the patent is obvious to a person skilled in the art. So for that, you will have to carry out a prior art search. Or there are other grounds as well based on which you can actually invalidate the patent. For instance, if they have not met certain requirements under the Patent Act. So there is a requirement for filing Form 3 every 6 months. That means you have to update the Patent Office on the foreign filing of your patent application. So if you have filed a patent application in India, and also you have filed subsequently the corresponding applications in different countries, then you have to update the patent office about the status of those applications. So if you fail to do that, that also can be used as a ground over there, right? So those are some of the grounds that I just quickly was talking about. Now, revocation petition is filed based on the grounds provided in Section 64 of the Indian Patent Act. Likewise, if the patent has not been granted, or it's been less than a year since the patent has been granted, you can go for a pre or a post grant opposition, and these are filed based on the grounds specified in Section 25 Clause 1 and Section 25 Clause 2 for pre and post grant opposition respectively. Now moving on to The state-of-the-art search, as I said, there are different objectives when you're carrying out a state-of-the-art search. So this is basically a very broad search. So when we're talking about the other kinds of searches that we discussed in the previous strategies, all of them, or the different kinds of patent search, all of them were very specific in nature, in the sense you're trying to identify these specific documents, either for filing a patent application or for getting a patent revoked over there. But when we talk about state-of-the-art search, we are probably trying to identify a particular technology. So if as a company you want to venture into a new technology domain, so you would like to see what the IP landscape is or the patent landscape is in that particular technology domain. For example, if I want to venture into wireless charging, so these days you're aware that these high-end smartphones have this feature of wireless charging, so you can use them. Now, what I want to do is, as a company, I want to introduce wireless charging in laptops. So that's probably my idea that I want to introduce. So I look whether are there any patents in that particular domain pertaining to these laptops, and if at all, in which countries these patents are there. So by white space, what I mean is the area where there is no intellectual property protection existing in that technology domain. So there could be a likelihood that there are no patents or very little patents in the domain of wireless charging in laptops. So could be reasons. For example, it may not be easy for you to actually translate that technology that you're using in mobile phones for wireless charging to laptops. So then that could be one. Second also could be the cost. Maybe the cost is very high when you're trying to actually carry out such research in that domain areas. So those are secondary reasons, but primarily you look out for those areas wherein you can find these white spaces. And likewise, you also want to look at barriers. So that means if I'm looking at this wireless area, and then I identify that there are a lot of patents in this area, but then I try to identify what are the key patents over there, whether all the patents are key or are they blocking, or likewise, only there are certain patents that may be blocking my invention over there. So that's also one of the assessments that you carry out if you want to enter into a particular country or into a particular area of technology of your interest. Now, this is also used as a tool for valuation of a company. For example, if a company is planning to acquire another company, then they would be looking at their intellectual property assets. So valuation would be how many of these patents or how many of these intellectual property has actually been licensed. So if, and what is the revenue that these patents are generating. So if there are more revenue is being generated and more of these licensing is happening, then that may actually add to the value of that particular company. Likewise, they also look at how strong the IP portfolio is, something we call as the due diligence that is carried out to check. So you may have 100 patents, but then one is the commercial aspect, how many of them is actually commercially viable. So we looked at the status in Professor Sam's presentation that less than 10% of the patents that are granted are commercialized, right? So that could be one of the reasons wherein you actually look at whether it can be acquired, whether a company can be acquired or not, or a merger can happen on there. So if it's adding value, then they may acquire it. But if it can become a liability. So if there are patents, but then those patents are weak patents, that means there is a chance that the patent may be held invalid. So in such situations also they may value and they may actually move out of the acquisition or merger. So they are trying to primarily evaluate whether based on the IP portfolio or the patent portfolio, you have to proceed with the acquisition or you have to proceed with the merger or not. So they look at the commercial aspect, and also the strength of the patent portfolio over there. So whether whatever patents you have, whether these are in fact very strong patents or are they very weak patents. That means if someone is opposing, the patent may get revoked, and then you may not have any monopoly over that particular product, which is forming part of that patent. Likewise, this also is used as a licensing opportunity. So for instance, IBM generates in fact close to $1 billion from their patent portfolio over there. So if you want to look at licensing opportunities, so you may be looking at companies which have got good licensing potential or they are licensing a lot of their patents in a particular domain or in different domains. So that's also one way of looking at the patent landscape to identify the state-of-art search based on the products that are available in the market. And finally, the last but definitely not the least is to identify solutions to existing problems in R&D and manufacturing. So as a researcher, you can also rely on the patent literature to identify solutions to existing problems. So previously, I recall when I used to carry out a research, if there was a roadblock, I would always refer the scientific documents. But in fact, patent documents are very good. So I'll talk about that, what the benefits is, because you find that the disclosure has to be comprehensive over there. So you have to fully and particularly disclose your invention. So there are patents I've seen in the pharmaceutical domain that can go up to 500 pages I've seen in the US. So the disclosure can be very comprehensive. So that helps in a way if you want to look at any existing problems that are existing in your R&D and manufacturing, and use patent literature, in fact, as one of the tools for having solutions to such inventions. Now, moving on to my next section on patent search tools, what I'm going to cover over here is what are the databases that are available. So we have patent office databases. For example, INPAS is the patent office database of the Indian Patent Office. You have the eSpaceNet Search, which is the database of the European Patent Office. Dr. Asha would in fact be carrying out a hands-on training session in the afternoon on how you can carry out a search on this. Likewise, you also have the USPTO's database. So USPTO is the United States Patent Office database. The Indian and the USPTO databases cover exclusively only the Indian and the US patent literature respectively. But the eSpaceNet database actually indexes about the patent literature of close to 100 plus countries. So you can find that in that sense, it is one of the most comprehensive databases that we have on patent literature. And the benefit is that it is free. So all these patent office databases are free to search, free to download. So that's one of the benefits that you have. You also have third-party databases such as Google Patents, Free Patent Online. So these are also free databases. But Google Patents does not have the kind of coverage that eSpaceNet is currently offering, or even you have WIPO for that matter. But Google Patents is expanding their patent literature domain to various countries. So currently the number of countries I believe are restricted in the Google patent databases when compared with the eSpaceNet. Then you also have proprietary databases. So these are the databases, unless you subscribe them, you will not be in a position to use them. So they are user friendly. So there may be a lot of features that you can use while carrying out a search. So LexisNexis Total Patent One is one database, which is in fact used by the Indian Patent Office. There are other databases such as PatBase, Newport. SciFinder is exclusively for carrying out search of chemical structures. So that I have a slide on that. So I'll discuss over there, but I'm not going to go into the details of such databases. Okay, so I think I only have maybe 20 minutes more. So moving on to the benefits of patent search. So as I said before, most of these databases are available online, and these are free to browse, free to download. All you need is an active internet connection and a mobile device or a laptop. It provides you a global coverage of patent literature. So even China is covered. So you'll find this translation available in the European Patent Office site. So you find that Chinese documents, Korean documents. So because in China, if you have to file a patent application, you'll have to translate it into China and file it over there. Likewise in Korea and Japan, and even in European countries, certain European countries, you have to file in the regional languages. So such literature is also covered by the patent. So if you compare this with the non-patent literature, such literatures may be available, but then you will have to either use a Google Translate tools while you're carrying out a search for non-patent literature. That means specifically the scientific literature over there. Availability of machine translation of foreign language patent documents. So as I said, you have a global coverage, and one of the benefits is that even the machine translations of these documents are available in these patent office database sites. So your EPO has this machine translation which translates all these documents into various languages. In fact, English is one of the options. So if you want to look at the document, you can translate it. You can translate the abstract. Abstract is normally by default, you find a translation English, but if you want to download the document, a translated version, you can use the machine translation and download the foreign language patent documents. Patent literature is comprehensive. This is what I just mentioned in my previous slide. Provides option for searching based on classification of technical content. So this is very important, primarily because this is unique to the patent systems. You normally don't find that such a system actually exists in the case of carrying out search for non-patent literature. You always have to rely on the keywords over there or combination of keywords, various synonyms. But this is something that is unique, the classification system, wherein the patents are in fact classified by the patent office into various classification symbols, depending on the class under which it may fall. So I have slides on that. So now moving on to the next section on the patent search strategies. So you find these are normally the three major search strategies. In fact, these are the three search strategies that are used. Either you can use a keyword-based search that we normally do in Google or on these various databases that you have, non-patent literature database, could be Cyrus, could be Scopus, could be Science Direct, could be Elsevier, or could be Thomson. So all those databases, you normally use these keyword-based searches. Patent classification-based search is unique. I'll discuss that in detail. I have slides on that. And finally, structure-based search, as I said, for chemistry-related inventions. So in fact, I read this article where it says, one compound can have 1,000 names. So that's one of the issues that you have when you're trying to carry out a search for structures. But then all those 1,000 structures, all those 1,000 names will always point to this one particular structure over there. So in that sense, this is unique. So you have proprietary databases wherein you carry out structure-based search. You also have patent office databases, in fact, and non-patent databases are also available wherein you can draw the structure and upload, but then they are not very comprehensive in the sense that you may not find the kind of literature that you find when you're doing it on a proprietary database such as SciFinder over there. Sorry. So keyword-based search can be, you are carrying out search of a single word, for example, escalator. It can also be a phrase, for example, doorknob, wherein you're using 2 words, or a rodent trap. Now, normally, whenever you are trying to try to do a keyword search for your invention, for a patentability, whatever it is, the first thing that you do is you try to identify all the various synonyms that are possible or likelihood. So it could be one that you are already aware of, and then you can also add on to that list by carrying out a search and identifying new keywords while you're browsing these literature searches. So for example, you can see I've just given an example of a mouse trap. So the synonyms could be rat trap, rodent trap, etc. So all those can be used in combination by using these suitable operators. So we have these and or operators that you can use, not operators, to carry out these searches. Avoid using homonyms for your search. For example, mouse. Now, a homonym is that the word may have 2 different meanings altogether over there. So mouse can be an animal, or it could be your hardware that you're using along with your laptops or your desktops over there. Right. Now, what are the limitations that are normally associated with these keyword-based searches? It may not be possible to capture all the synonyms. So as I said, it is definitely not possible to carry out all the synonyms. And also it does not, we don't, if you're carrying out a search if you're carrying out a search in an English language, so there is a likelihood that you may miss out all these Chinese documents, non-patent literature that may be there in the Chinese language or Asian languages or even the European languages. That's also one of the issues that you normally find. Broad keyword searches can lead to irrelevant results over there. So I have an example wherein I'll elaborately discuss over this. And if you have missed out any particular keyword or a synonym, then there is a likelihood that you may miss out relevant results over there. So we'll quickly look at also when I discuss this. Now moving on to classification-based search. Classification-based search basically is something unique to the patent system. So classification is not new. For example, if I had to give you an analogy, you can look at the library classification system, right? So whenever a new book arrives in library, the librarian would actually catalog it based on the title, but then he puts it in a particular shelf, so which is normally numbered, and that each number has got a significance. So it may be a book or a chemistry. So within a chemistry, it could be analytical chemistry or could be inorganic chemistry. So all those things are normally classified. So the titles over there may be different, but the librarian recognizes and then identifies where this particular book has to be placed based on the title, and then does that. So titles, based on the titles, you are always doing it. So in the case of patents, also based on the abstract, the patent office will look, or the patent examiner will initially look at the document, and he will have to classify it at least in one class. But normally you find in the case of patents, these patent documents are classified in multiple classes. So I'll show you that because I have a particular sample of the prior art document over there. There I'll quickly show you what that is and where does it normally reflect, what's the significance of it. These are faster and easier to carry out search. So if you identify the particular classification symbol, you can quickly carry out a search using that particular symbol in these patent databases. So most of these patent databases support the keyword as well as classification based searches, whether it's the Indian database, whether it is the eSpaceNet, or whether it's the US patent. Now, looking at the system, so basically you have this international patent classification system. If you look at the history, it was developed by World Intellectual Property Organization, and which is used by 90 plus countries for simplifying patents. What is the benefit of searching by classification? So instead of searching each country for patent, IPC allows to search for patents. Information is available for 90 countries at once, and you're less likely to miss patents similar to the idea of your invention. This we'll discuss. And also you can actually exclude irrelevant patents that may actually, you may actually find results if you're carrying out a broad keyword search. Now, this is how the international patent classification system looks like. So you have 8 sections. So whenever you file a patent application, it has to be classified in at least one of these sections over there. So section A to section H. So section A, it corresponds to human necessities. Likewise, section H corresponds to electricity. So if you have developed a pharmaceutical molecule, it normally falls in the category of section A. Particularly A61 is where, A61K, if I recall correctly, is where you classify these pharmaceutical products over there, or molecules having pharmaceutical potential. Now this is basically a hierarchy. So in each section, you'll find that under each section, there is a class. In fact, not one class, there are many classes. And under each class, you'll find many subclasses. And under each subclass, you'll find many groups. And under each groups, you'll find many subgroups. So A is followed by a number, so that points to a class. And then subsequently, that is followed by an alphabet that points to a subclass. It is followed further by a number which points to a group, and also another number which points to the subgroup. So that's how basically it is classified. So it's a hierarchy that you find. Asha may show you the tree, how that particular tree exists when she is discussing that session in the afternoon. Now, US has got its own system, but this is redundant now. So they have actually now moved on to CPC. So CPC is basically a joint collaboration between the US Patent Office and the European Patent Office. So now both of them follow the cooperative patent classification. When compared to cooperative patent classification, is considered to be more versatile because it has got more definitions. So if you look at IPC, it has got about 70,000 symbols. So 70,000 symbols is like each symbol is actually giving you a definition. So definition could be that of a product, could be that of a process, or could be that of a use or an application. So CPC is covering about 140,000 definitions over there. So it has got 140,000 symbols. So your search can be more specific when you're using CPC, but then the limitation is CPC is not actually adopted by all these countries which have a patent law. So in India, it is not possible for you to carry out on the Indian Patent Office database using CPC, but then you can carry out a search using the IPC over there. Right. So I just have this example. What I'm doing over here is I have a concept. I'm trying to carry out a keyword search of the concept, and in simultaneously or sequentially after that, I also compare it with the classification based search. So I'm also doing the search for the same concept based on classification. And I try to compare the keyword based search with the classification based search over there, and to show you what actually can be the gaps, even though the results are pretty old over here, but then probably what you need to understand is how it works actually. So basically my concept over here is I want to introduce a helmet with a wiper. So as you're aware, in Kerala, it rains almost 8 to 9 months in a year. So if you're a two-wheeler owner, you may be using these helmets. So while it is raining, I want to introduce a wiper on my helmet, which I'm wearing as a two-wheeler pillion rider, or maybe even as a driver over there. So that once it rains, whatever, if I still want to continue driving, if there is water falling on the windshield, of my helmet, this wiper would actually wipe off the rainfall that is falling. So that's basically my idea. So I want to carry out a search. So one is what I'm doing is in patent search, I'm carrying out a very broad search. I'm just looking at helmet. And then I also narrow down my search. I specifically look at my concept, but I want to show you what the difference is when you're carrying out a search for helmet, as well as when you are carrying out a very narrow or a specific search over there. So when I carry out a search for helmet, you can see I have ended up with close to 24,000 results. So these results may vary because this is a very old search. And you see, so I have ended up with 24,000 results. So it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. So if you're carrying out a very broad keyword search, you'll find a lot of irrelevant references. So you'll waste a lot of time and your resources on that. So the next is I'm going for a very specific search. I want to see helmets, because I know helmets is not a new concept. I want to see whether are there any relevant references wherein the wipers are being used along with the helmets. So when I carry out a search, I end up with 12 results. So these are very specific, as you can see from the results: wiper, blade, apparatus, helmet with integrated visor, wiper. And so all those things you can see are very specific, right? Now let me move on to the searching by the patent classification. The same concept, I'm trying to carry out a search on the database eSpaceNet. This is what Asha would be discussing in the hands-on session in the next session, in the afternoon session. So what I've done is I've used the search. I've selected classification search. So for example, this is a classic mode. So this interface is different from what Dr. Asha would be actually looking today. So the interface has changed. You still have the option of choosing the classic eSpaceNet interface over there. So this was carried out in that particular model. So you can see there is three options. One is a smart search, one is advanced search, and one is a classification search. So previously I had chosen the smart search. Now I'm choosing classification search. So when I use the word helmet, I can identify these particular symbols. So you can see helmet has got a classification symbol A42B3/00. So this is what I was talking about. A points to human necessities, section on human necessities. 42 is a number, is a class which covers helmets or helmet covers or headgear in particular. B is basically the alphabet. So B comes under 42. So that's the subclass. And then you have 3, which points to the group. And the /00 is basically the subgroup over there. So that's how the hierarchy is. So it's basically a long tree. Now, what I've done is I have further expanded helmets. So as you can see under helmets, you see that there are so many definitions that are given. So I want to see whether under helmets, is there something such as visor covered over there. So if it is there, what it means is that that specifically within the helmet, this particular visor would actually be there, or the wiper would actually be there on the visor over there. So that's what I'm trying to identify using the classification search. Even though we have to rely on classification search, we identify the classification search based on keywords. So it's also essential to identify the correct keyword while carrying out a classification search. So I'm trying to look within helmets, is there my concept available? So yes, you can see that there is A42B326 that I've highlighted over there. So with cleaning means such as wiper. So it comes under the section helmets. So that what it means is that it is in fact a part of helmets. So the patent office has identified documents under these class that may cover the classification. So what I'm doing over here is I copy this particular classification symbol A42B3/26, and then I paste it and carry out a search. So you can see I have obtained 433 results over there. So if you look at my specific search, I came up with 12 hits over there. But now when I'm doing a classification search, I come up with 433 results. So you see that the keywords that I may have used, for example, the fifth result, rain removal device for helmet, is not something that I had used as a keyword. So this is not going to reflect in my search. So if I don't have the correct keywords, I may miss out these relevant references. But if I identify the correct classification symbol, I can avoid the relevant references being missed from my keyword search, right? Even one of the examples, off-road rolling film vision system. So can you imagine that this is actually pointing out to a wiper for a helmet gear over there, for a headgear over there. So those is what yeah, so quickly moving on to chemical structure based search. I hope you understood what the difference I was trying to elaborate over there. So chemical structure search, as I said, are particularly for carrying out search for a chemical based on a chemical structure. So it could be a chemical compound, it could be a salt, a solvate, a polymorph. So all those can be covered using the chemical structure search. It can be a Marcus structure. So Marcus structure is basically something that you come across in the context of patent documents. So it is a very general structure which would encompass a lot of compounds within that general structure. You can also carry out the process search. So you have something called as reaction search. So wherein you draw these reactions A to B, and then you look for references whether your invention is novel or not, or whether any relevant literature is available. So you can either do a product search or you can do a process search. So this is what a Marcus structure is. Basically, you can see that it is a chemical structure over there. And now you have various substituents over there which are designated by R1, R2, X, Y, Z, R3. So these actually point out to different groups over there. So when you look at the list of groups or the substituents, you can come up with numerous compounds based on this single structure. So that's basically what we describe as a Marcus structure. So I'll just show you one of the documents. So just give me a moment. Let me know if the patent document, I may have to actually stop sharing my screen for a moment because I believe the patent document may not be visible. So just let me share the entire screen, or let me just share the multiple documents. Yeah. Okay. I hope now it is visible, the patent document. So this is a pharmaceutical invention. Now something that we already discussed. Just a moment. I hope this is visible to all of you, the patent document. Can someone respond?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So this is a US patent, and this is pertaining to a pharmaceutical product. It's an anti-cancer product, basically. So this is what I was talking about, the classification system, classification symbol that you find, right? So A61K, as I said, is normally, invariably, you'll find that classification symbol being there in the patent applications which cover these pharmaceutical molecules over there. So there are two classification symbols that they have used, A61 and C. C is for chemistry, A is for, A designates human necessities, right? And then you have the abstract. So the first page, you normally find the formal details when the patent was filed. So whenever you calculate the 20-year period, you normally do it from either the filing date in that particular country, or based on if it's a PCT application has been filed, so based on the PCT filing date. So you can see the PCT here was filed on Jan 8, 1999. So this would remain valid till Jan. So this has expired, in fact, expired in Jan 2019, based on the 20-year period. So you are supposed to look at the abstract and quickly just don't look at the claims if you're doing it for the first time. What I normally do is I look at these molecules. So it has covered about 88 molecules. So you can look at the procedures. So if you look at the procedure, this is more scientific in nature. So by looking at the procedure as a chemist, you can identify that, what these compounds are, and how it has been characterized, how it has been made. By looking at the claims, it will be very difficult for you to analyze or understand if you're doing it for the first time. So that's something that you can avoid. Focus on the description. So you have uh, I'll also quickly run through you the various parts of a document. So basically you find that there is this background, that it starts with a background as to what is existing before this particular invention, and what are the issues or problems associated with those products that are already existing. So that's what covers in the background. And then you move into the summary of the invention. So summary is where you're describing about your invention, and then you provide a detailed description. So wherein you in detail provide the process, how it is being made, and what the characteristics of the product are. And finally, it comes up with it ends with a claim. So there are drawings which are optional, but since it's a chemistry related invention, you don't find that there are drawings over here. But I'll go quickly to my second sample, and then maybe we'll wind up. Sorry. Yeah, I hope this is visible, the second patent document. So this is a capillary irrigation system, mechanical device. So you see in mechanical devices, look at the drawings. So drawings are something that can actually give you a very good indication of what that invention could be. So this is basically an irrigation system. And then you look at the background and also look at what are the issues with the background. Likewise, you move quickly into the summary. So summary is where you can see what that invention is. So this seems to be very simple, but then the applications that are granted recently, you'll find those are very complicated, in the sense that the patent drafters try to make it more complicated in some of these cases. And so always try to look at the examples that have been illustrated over there. So that will give you a fair idea of what that patent is covering. Don't look at the claims. I would advise you not to look at the claims. Look at the abstract, and if it seems relevant to your invention, then focus on the summary and the detailed description. Specifically, look at examples over there. So I think let me get back to my presentation. Yeah, is my PPT visible?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. So finally, I move on to the conclusion. What do you need to do? So if you are an inventor, you carry out a novelty search before filing a patent application. So it could be a provisional patent application. Normally we say novelty search is just one aspect. But if you want to file a patent application with complete specification, carry out a full patentability search. Because that will help you in, one is refining your invention if there is something that is already existing, and also wasting your time, money, and resources on an invention that is already there in the public domain, right? Now, identify the IP roadblocks if you want to introduce your product in the market. So even if you have an IP protection, we saw an example that there is a likelihood that you can infringe upon somebody else's intellectual property. So identify those IP roadblocks and develop a strategy for those roadblocks. So it could be an invalidity strategy, or it could be a non-infringing strategy. So non-infringing circumvention or a workaround strategy. And if you are focusing on acquisitions or mergers, evaluate the IP portfolio prior to acquiring businesses with core focus on IP. So there may be businesses which may not have any IP as a core focus, but businesses which have IP, you can always look at the IP portfolio. This is what we have done over the previous 4 or 5 years. And then thank you for your attention. In case you have any questions, you can always So I'm open. Let me stop sharing my screen. But if someone wants to, you can probably send an email if you have queries on IPR to this particular email ID, or you can visit our website. We also have a YouTube channel on CIPRS. So even the last Atal FDP that we have done, we have uploaded there. So you can also visit. You can browse. You can visit the YouTube channels to the videos of most of the programs we normally upload it over there. So I'll stop sharing my screen and I'm open for questions.
Thank you, sir. So, dear participants, if you have any queries, you can post directly. Otherwise, you can put it in the chat box.
Asha, do we have any questions in the chat box?
No, sir.
No. Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yes,
participants,
sir. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, I have a question, sir. This is
Yes.
Imran.
Yeah. So tell me.
Sir, in a slide in the beginning regarding nature of prior art, there is one mention of a non-patent literature wherein you said that if you have mentioned or give a detailed description of the invention in conferences, you can file it within 12 months from the disclosure. So this is available
in India. In India, I'm talking about the Indian context. Yeah.
Can I get to know, is there any mention of this provision in the patent?
Yeah, it is there in section 31, if I'm correct. So you can look at section 29 to 34 in the Indian Patent Act. So what does not constitute as an anticipation.
Okay,
So
okay.
you'll find that. 29 to 34.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so is there any search tool? I have a question from Dr. Rekha. Is there any search tool to track the infringement? Just a moment. Any search tool to track the infringement of the patented product? Ma'am, you'll have to rely on market survey. That's one thing. Second, yes, you can actually look at the patent applications that are filed by your competitors. So that's also one way wherein you can track whether they may be infringing your patent application or not. So after 18 months, it gets published. So as a company which has focus on IP, you normally track those patent applications of your competitors. So every week it gets published after the 18-month period in all of these patent offices. So you track them depending on which country you're focusing on. So that is one way of doing it. But if there is no patent application that has been filed, then you may have to rely on the market survey. So you may have to see the availability of these products, where it is being sold, and then check if it is infringing and then initiate an infringement action over there.
But as such, there is no search tool as we have in the case of patent search and others.
Yeah, that's what I said, ma'am. You can use patent literature. That is one of the ways. Indirectly, you can use that. There may be proprietary databases wherein, for example, in the case of pharmaceuticals, you have something called as IMS Health, which actually captures the sales of these pharmaceutical products across the globe. So if in India, if you have subscribed to that particular database, you can find out the products that are being introduced, although there may be a 3 or a 6 month delay. Based on that, maybe you can see if it's a generic product, and if I am the innovator of the brand name over there, then in such situations, if my patent is still there, I can actually use that also as a tool to identify these products. But pharmaceuticals, it may be relatively easier, but it may not be so in case of other fields of technology. So those are the two ways in which you can probably look at that. So I have a question from Mr. Rangarajan. Is the patent application common for all products of consumables and medicines, or any difference? So if so, what kind of difference is there in it? Well, sir, there is no differentiation, as even Srinivasan sir was talking in the previous presentation, that all we have to grant patents in all fields of technology. And then you have a particular format that you have to follow. For example, I gave you that you have to provide a description in the background of your invention, and then you have to provide a summary. You have to provide a detailed description. So if you are claiming a product, irrespective of whichever category or whichever technology it is associated with, you need to identify what that product is, what it is made of, how you make that product. So there are no other requirements. Requirements are uniform for all fields of technology when you are filing a patent application, right? But requirements may be different because you're talking about medicines and all those. So then there may be regulatory requirements, but that is not something that actually is looked at by the patent application. So even if you don't get a regulatory approval for a drug, that cannot be used as a ground for refusing a patent. Right? Yeah.
Is there any other questions? So I think if there is no more question, we can conclude here. So
Yes, ma'am. Let me invite Anina of second semester to deliver the vote of thanks.
Am I audible?
Yes,
yes,
Anina.
you are.
Yes, okay. Good afternoon, all. I'm Anina Vincent, a student in IUCAPRS CUSAT. I'm speaking on the behalf of everyone which is present here. I'm so happy today to deliver the vote of thanks because Ridhish sir is our professor in IUCAPRS. I hope you all get very much information about patent search and its importance. It is so useful and informative class. So first, I would like to thank Dr. Ridhish sir of IUPRS CUSAT for giving this wonderful class. Sir gave a crystal clear information about how can we search patent, and sir begins with the class with the different types of prior art searches. They are novelty search, patentability search, freedom to operate search, invalidity search, state of the art search, etc. Then said about nature of prior art survey. After this, after all this, all the types of patent searches are described. Then different types of patent searches tools are discussed. Example, InPass, eSpace, search, USPTO search, Google patent search, free patent online search, everything which is crystal clearly described in his class. Then benefits of patent search and patent search strategies all are described with a suitable examples. A visual representation of patent search is given in this session. Many unknown information about patent searches get through our class. So thank you so much, Ridhish sir, for giving this valuable class from the bottom of my heart. So thank you so much. Next, I would like to thank Dr. Basis sir of IUCAPRS for arranging this session and giving this opportunity. Then I would like to thank Atal Academy for giving the platform of study about this patent search. Next, I would like to thank Asha ma'am for organizing this session. Last but not least, I would like to thank everyone which is present here for the participation and for making this session grand success. So thank you everyone. Thank you, sir.
So thank you all. So we